Oh yeah, 1 second, we're on. Good morning, evening, good noon, good night. I'm just pulling up some notes for me to talk about because my brain doesn't work sometimes. And we're going to continue with Dropbox. Good morning, evening, good night. Okay, so today we are going to be talking a little bit about, well, one, colors for sure, and why we need to use 0% opacities on them. Okay, so just a reminder, we are recording all of these sessions and we will make them available right after we're done the webcast. There we go. So a great question came in yesterday about colors from Steve Mancera. And the question was, when we draw shape and flow or any other design tool like Illustrator, it automatically includes a fill color. To disable it, you just need to reduce its opacity to 0% in flow. And why is that? Mainly because you probably are used to just removing the color, or even in like Figma or Sketch, you trash the color and then it's gone. But in Flow, you don't do that. And I think in Illustrator, you don't do that either. You can fill it with a clear color or whatever, but you do fill it with a color. But the main thing, the first thing it has to do with is the fact that we are exporting to a lot of different types. I mean, we're exporting to things like images, animated images like GIFs and PNGs, both static and non-static, or static and animated versions, movies, including sounds, SVGs and HTML and iOS and Lottie and React. There's lots of different things that we're going out to. And second, we're also importing from a lot of different places. So we're importing from Sketch and Figma. Those are the two main ones, but you can also work in Illustrator and Affinity and get your stuff into your designs, or any other design tool in general, Vectornate or something like that, because we also import SVGs. So we import SVGs into Flow. You can drag them and drop them in. You can start a new project with an SVG, but you can also copy and paste images. You can start from an image as well. And you can copy and paste text from anywhere. So we're coming in from a lot of different places, and we're actually going out to a lot of different places as well. And that means that there is a lot of change between different models. So Illustrator, or any design tool, has its own model for representing the thing that you're looking at, the aesthetics that you're looking at on the screen. And the model between Sketch is different, or Sketch's model is different from Figma's model, which is different from Illustrator's model, which is different from Affinity's model. Even when those tools export things to like SVGs, they do it in a different way. They have a different model for the way that they're exporting things. And and when you're designing a tool like Flow that has all these inputs and all these outputs, you want that tool to be consistent. You want the way that it works to feel and be consistent. And so when we're doing things like this, or when we're designing how, or a long time ago when we were designing how Flow works, we had to really take into consideration all the places that we're going to, all the places that are coming in, and build an interaction model for Flow that is consistent between all of those things. And in this way, this question about colors is why don't we have like a trash? Why can't I just get rid of it? That falls exactly into this category. And because we export to so many places, and because software is the most complicated thing to export, we generally will take models from software, whether it's CSS or JavaScript or iOS code, and we'll use that as the baseline because it is the most difficult thing to do. And in this sense, there is no trashing of a property in software. Like a shape has a fill color, whether or not you specify it. The default is probably a clear color, but it still has a fill color. It always has a stroke width, but you might not see the stroke width, but the property is there. And every property exists at the beginning of the animation. It exists in the middle of the animation, exists at the end of the animation, exists throughout the entire thing when it comes to software. And so even a shape that doesn't appear to have a fill color actually has one. And as I mentioned, it's just that you can't see it. And so what does this trashing actually mean in your design tool? And let's go over to Figma, because that's one thing that everybody's using these days. And let's go here. And let's switch to that. Okay, so we have this line. Well, let's just create a new project. And an artboard or a frame, and let's just drop a rectangle into that thing. Okay, so what we're talking about when we have that trash in Sketch, it's an actual trash icon, and here, right, so we can have we can get rid of it by either hiding it or turning it off or deleting it. And now it says in a way that if you're looking at this as a designer, there is no fill. But that's not really true. We're just not drawing the fill color. I think from a developer perspective, whoever's been brilliant at writing Figma or developing Figma, it's not rendering the color, but the color still exists. The way we think about it as a designer is that it's not there, but it actually is. Okay. Same thing with a stroke. Here it appears that there is no stroke, but really there is one on that shape. And okay, so what? Okay, so there is no color, there is color, whatever there is. Like right here, there is a color there, and it's a clear color. Well, what is actually a clear color? A clear color is any color whatsoever that has 0% opacity on it. And you know, in a design tool that says, okay, you can get rid of the color, you know, one of the things that I interpret this as is, well, they're thinking about their application, which is totally fair, the context of their application, how the users are going to be using their application in general. Do they actually need to, as app developers, think about animation? Probably not. Probably not. So it might not occur to them that it is important to have in that mental model of working this idea that colors need to exist throughout an entire animation. So they can get away with a feature like this, which is really convenient, because when you go and you look over and you say, ah, yeah, I can just see that there is no color here. But when it does come to animation, you can't just animate from a nothing property to a something property. You can't go from nothing to something. You have to go from something to something else. And trashing just means replacing the current color with a value of clear. So let's look at a concrete example. Let's go over to Flow and let's look at a concrete example. And you can see my amazingly full desktop right there. And we're going to call this colors.flow, and we're going to replace that. And let's put a rectangle on the scene, the stage, and we're going to press Command Option R. We're going to turn on relative mode because we're just going to make a bunch of changes. Now let's just make this a bit bigger, say 300 by 300. There we go. Let's make the stroke width 20, make it nice and thick so we can see it. And what we're going to do is we're going to change this fill color to black, nice and dark color like that, black, so we can see it. Okay. Now I'm going to turn off. No, let's leave relative mode on and do one more change. We're going to do one more change. We're going to make that color clear with 0%. Okay. So here we have our shape, and it looks just like a shape that has no color in it, right? And let's say we want that thing to be pink at the end of our animation. Well, all we need to do is just drag this color into that, and it creates the animation for us. And it'll go from that clear color all the way to the pink color, just like that. Okay, and it fades in. Makes sense, right? And what it's going to do is it's going to animate from whatever that clear color was to the new color. And if you can see just sort of around here, you see this color that's sort of fading in. What it's actually doing, it's fading from clear black to clear pink. Okay, it's not just fading from nothing to pink, it's fading from one color to another color. And now let's give you a little bit of context for that. Okay, we're going to turn on relative mode again. We're going to shrink this one, say to 125. And now we're going to copy that and go up here and we'll say edit, paste in place with key values in place. So now we have two copies of the same thing. We're still in relative mode. I'm going to grab rectangle copy 1. I'm going to move it down, keep it in line, and make sure those two things are centered. But instead of the color at the beginning for this one being that black with 0%, we're going to make it pink, and then we're going to drop that opacity down. Okay, so now we're animating from pink, no opacity, to pink full opacity. And here's the animation. Oops. And let me go back again. I had relative mode on. I just did undo, and now let's make that animation happen again. Okay. And so now we're going to do this. And if you have a keen eye, and the stream is actually pretty solid, we are able to see that the color change is different. All right. So let me slow this down. And right about here, you can really notice the difference. See, this one is up here it's almost like a brown color, and here it's like a light pink color. Okay. And eventually you get to this point right here where it's still fairly light pink and fairly dark, but there is a noticeable aesthetic difference between the two of them. Okay. The end, they look identical, but it's the animation in between that's different, because we're going from one color to another, even though we can't see it. And that's the way software works. That's the way things get exported. That's the way the general model or the general idea of animating between colors works. It's not like if you have black with 0 opacity, it instantly becomes pink 0 opacity, or not. It will animate from black to pink. Now, let's go see if anybody has any questions so far. Probably not. Nope. And no so far either. Oh, no. Go to about. Yep. Okay. So, so what does it mean when you actually trash a color in Figma? I don't know. I don't know what they represent that clear color with. Is it going to be clear black, clear white? It's probably going to be one of those two. Typically, it's going to be black with clear with a 0% opacity. That's just what most default settings would be for a clear color in software. But it might actually be your intention to animate from clear black to clear pink. And we don't know that. We can't fully guess. We can make some pretty reasonable assumptions as to what your intention is when you're animating, but this actually might be an explicit aesthetic choice that you're trying to make, or you're trying to do, to animate like this one. And it could also just be that your intention is to animate like this one. And when it becomes this question of we can't intuit what you want, as the developer of Flow, as the engineers behind Flow, we default to the assumption that in these cases, it's awesome for the animator, the designer, for you, to be explicit in what you're trying to do. So this is generally why we have this 0% opacity. This is how we treat those opacities, okay? And it's not just a simple thing of turning it on and off. Let's see, what else have we got for the notes for the day? I hope that makes sense. It also is very similar to the same principle as getting rid of a stroke width. You're not, the entire animation is always going to have, or the layer is always going to have a stroke width. You're either going to see it or you're not going to see it, okay? Let's just duplicate this timeline. And we're going to go back to something like this. We're just going to delete that layer. We're going to make this one 300 again, like that. Now, here we have a stroke, and let's just get rid of the animation there by selecting and deleting the last key value of that animation. So now, okay, no animations are happening. Let's make it a 40-point line, because we're going to talk about lines a little bit. Exact same principle as colors. There are two ways. There's actually three ways to make your stroke disappear. There's three ways. And you might have the intention of starting from one of those in any given context, okay? Which is why we also don't trash things like the stroke width. So let's say we wanted that to grow from 0 to 40. This is one way. You change the stroke width to 0, and it looks like there is no stroke width. That's one way of making sure that you don't see the stroke. And if we hit play, it'll animate in. Now, another way we can do this is if we get rid of that animation there, we can also say that the stroke color has 0% opacity. And there's a different aesthetic that comes out of this. It fades in. You might want that, right? Or you also might want to have a situation, let's delete that first key value again, where we are playing with the endpoints, okay? And let's go all the way back here, and we're going to change this endpoint to 0. And again, this is the third way you can get rid of the stroke width around a shape and have it appear by tracing it. Okay, so there's three ways. So in the context of an idea like trashing a stroke width, what does that mean, right? It doesn't really mean anything to us because there's so many different ways that it could be interpreted. All right, so explicitly getting rid of the stroke color means that you're going to fade it in. Explicitly getting rid of the stroke width means that you're going to grow it in. Explicitly getting rid of the endpoints means you're going to trace it in. All right, and so when you might encounter some situations or little things inside of Flow that don't fully make sense, like this one, and it could be exactly that this is the reason why. All right. Hi, now I'm back. You can see my face again. I'm going to try and figure out in the next couple of days how to get a little picture-in-picture inside of the stream that we're using. But for now, that's today's webcast. Okay, so simple idea. Why does this work a little bit differently than Figma or Sketch or some other tools? And what is this? Why am I forced to work with colors in a different way? And hopefully this gives you a little bit of a sense as to why we make these decisions or why these things are the way they are inside of Flow. All right, talk to you soon.